The night was still, save for the faint rustling of leaves that barely moved in the cool evening breeze. There was an emptiness in the air, a hollow silence that settled like fog over the small, desolate alley where she lay. Her body trembled not from the cold, but from the agony of what had just transpired. A mother dog, no longer young, her fur matted and ragged, curled herself around a pile of straw as the remnants of her broken spirit hung heavy in the air. The alley was nothing but shadows, and the only light came from a flickering street lamp that seemed to have given up on the world. She looked at her stillborn puppies, their tiny bodies untouched by the warmth of life. Her eyes, once full of the joy that motherhood had promised, were now hollow, full of an unspoken sorrow. She had given everything, her body, her heart, her life, but it hadn't been enough. Her breath hitched, each inhale sharp and shallow, as if she was desperately trying to find some way to hold on to the fleeting moments of life, her puppies' lives that slipped away with every heartbeat. In the distance, a car passed, its tires swishing through the wet road, but the sound felt muffled, distant, as if it belonged to another world altogether. Here in this forgotten space there was nothing but her loss, her grief, and the unbearable quiet that followed. The streetlights flickered above the narrow alley, casting long, jagged shadows that stretched like forgotten memories along the cracked pavement. The night felt different tonight, heavier, as if the world was holding its breath. In this isolated corner of the city, where the hustle of daily life seemed like a distant memory, a small, trembling form lay curled up against the cold, hard ground. A mother dog, older than she seemed, with fur matted and tangled, clung to the last remnants of her strength. Her eyes were closed, but there was no peace in her rest. Her body shivered, not from the cold, but from something deeper, something impossible to ignore. She had just given birth, but her pups, fragile and delicate, lay motionless at her side. The stillness around them was suffocating, oppressive. The mother's eyes fluttered open for a moment, and she looked down at the tiny, lifeless bodies of her puppies. They were so small, barely more than a breath, yet to her, they were the whole world. Her heart ached, but not just from the physical toll of labor. No, it was the silent scream inside her chest, the realization that she would never hear their tiny paws pattering against the ground, never see their eyes open to the world. The alley was eerily quiet, save for the occasional rustle of a plastic bag drifting by, caught in the slow and predictable wind. The world seemed oblivious to the dog's pain, unaware of the bond that had been severed just hours before. In the distance, the hum of traffic, passing cars, engines rumbling, people living their lives, felt like another world, far from here, far from her. The mother's breath was shallow now, labored. She nudged one of the stillborn pups gently with her nose, her eyes brimming with confusion, with desperation. She licked their faces softly, over and over, as if the act of caring for them, even in death, could somehow bring them back to her. But there was no miracle, no sudden shift that would restore them to life. Her movements slowed, her strength draining with every attempt to revive the tiny bodies that would never stir. A sense of defeat, of hopelessness, settled in her bones. Her tail lay motionless behind her, lifeless like everything else around her. It wasn't just the loss that hurt, though. It was the betrayal of her body. Her instincts had been so sure, so certain that she could protect them, give them life. Yet here she was, broken and alone, curled up on the cold concrete as the world turned its back on her grief. She had failed them, and there was nothing she could do to change that. Her heart was heavy with the weight of that truth, her spirit broken in ways she couldn't understand. Tears, though invisible, welled in her eyes. The cool night air seemed to bite at her skin, but it wasn't the chill that made her tremble. It was the unrelenting ache in her chest, the hollow feeling of being abandoned by the very instincts that had once guided her, the emptiness that filled the space where life should have been. She tried to stand to lift herself, but her legs felt like they were made of stone. She collapsed back onto the ground, a soft whimper escaping her throat as she lay there, staring at her dead pup. The world around her seemed to hold its breath, the night growing heavier with every second, until the silence itself became suffocating. Then, faintly, in the distance, she heard it, a soft footstep, almost imperceptible. Her ears perked up, and for a moment she thought she might have imagined it. But no, it came again, a slight shuffle of feet, cautious but purposeful. It was followed by the sound of a voice, distant but clear, cutting through the silence like a thread of hope. She looked up weakly, blinking through the fog of grief that clouded her vision. A figure appeared at the mouth of the alley, a silhouette against the dim light of the street lamp. She wasn't sure who it was, but something about the presence felt different. It wasn't the same indifference she had felt from the world around her. This was a person who had noticed her pain. A young woman, carrying an air of hesitation in her every movement. She had stopped, seeing the dog in the alley, and now she was approaching, slow and tentative, as if unsure whether to draw near or retreat. But the mother dog didn't flinch, didn't pull away this time. She remained still, her eyes locked on the stranger, too tired to react, but somehow feeling a small spark of something more. The young woman took another step forward, then another, until she was close enough to kneel beside the dog. The mother dog's instinct was to pull away, to protect herself from yet another disappointment, but she couldn't. She was too weak, too exhausted to do anything except let the stranger come closer. The woman extended her hand slowly, as if she was inviting the dog to trust her, to let her in. The dog's body stiffened, every muscle tensed. But there was something in the woman's eyes that made her pause. There was something familiar in the way she moved. Something vulnerable, something gentle. It was a quiet invitation, one that said, "I see you. I understand." The mother dog's breath hitched. Her instinct told her to recoil, to retreat back into the shadows. But something about the woman, something about the kindness in her touch, made her hesitate. And so, after a long moment of uncertainty, she allowed herself to be touched. The woman's fingers brushed lightly against the dog's fur, soft and warm. And for the briefest of moments, the mother dog allowed herself to close her eyes. The woman didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her presence alone was enough. The first tears fell then, not from the mother dog, but from the woman. She had never expected this moment, never imagined that she would be the one to step into this dog's world, to offer solace in the face of such deep, aching loss. But as her tears mingled with the dirt and the wet ground beneath her, she knew that, in some small way, she had already begun to help. The dog wasn't alone anymore. The wind stirred around them, and for the first time that night, the alley didn't feel quite as empty. Maya hesitated as she approached the dog, her eyes scanning the narrow alley where the creature lay. The sight of the mother dog, broken and grieving, struck her more profoundly than she expected. The moonlight illuminated the alley, casting an eerie glow over the scene. Every crack in the pavement, every bit of refuse scattered about, seemed like a reminder of the neglect this poor creature had endured. The dog's fur was matted, and her body trembled as if every nerve in her being was fighting to hold on to whatever fragment of hope still remained. Maya's heart sank, a familiar knot tightening in her chest. The dog was still alive, barely, but the stillness around her was palpable, like the whole world had forgotten she existed. Maya had seen grief before, had experienced it herself, but never quite like this. The lifeless puppies by her side, their tiny bodies cold to the touch, told a painful story of loss. Maya could almost feel the mother's heartbreak, as though it was spilling out from the dog and into the space around them. She had always considered herself a survivor, someone who carried on no matter what the world threw at her. But now, as she knelt beside this dog, something deep inside her stirred, an undeniable recognition that they shared a quiet, unspoken bond. Maya's own past was a jumble of unhealed wounds, regret and abandonment, and in the way the mother dog lay there, crumpled in sorrow, Maya saw her own reflection. She knew the feeling of losing something precious, of being left behind. "Hey there," Maya whispered, her voice barely audible, her breath catching in her throat. She couldn't keep the tremor from her words, a vulnerability she wasn't used to showing. The dog's ears twitched at the sound, but she didn't move, didn't flinch as Maya reached out, slowly extending her hand toward the trembling creature. There was no growl, no snarl, just the quiet, defeated gaze of the mother dog. Her skin was cool to the touch when Maya gently ran her fingers through the fur along the dog's spine. It was so soft, and yet the mother's body was taut with grief. The dog's shallow breaths hitched as Maya stroked her back in slow, rhythmic movements, not quite knowing if this would help, or if it was just a futile gesture. But she couldn't stop. She couldn't turn away. There was something about this moment that felt too important, too raw to ignore. The mother dog shifted slightly, lifting her head ever so slightly, her cloudy eyes meeting Maya's for the briefest moment. It was as if the dog was asking for something, anything, to end the unbearable silence between them. Maya's heart tightened at the realization. This dog wasn't just grieving the loss of her puppies. She was grieving the loss of her own will to fight to survive. Maya's mind raced. She couldn't just leave. She couldn't walk away, not now. But what could she do? She wasn't a dog expert, just an ordinary woman who happened to cross paths with a creature in pain. Yet something deep inside told her that this wasn't just a chance encounter. The universe had a way of bringing the broken together, and perhaps this was her moment, her chance to give back in the only way she knew how. Maya reached into her bag, pulling out her phone and dialed the local animal shelter, her hands trembling. She wasn't sure if the shelter would be open or if anyone could help in time, but she had to try. The phone rang, then clicked to voicemail. Her stomach sank. She left a quick message, explaining the situation as best she could, describing the dog's condition, her heartache, and the fact that she wasn't sure how long the poor thing had been lying there. After the call, Maya remained silent for a moment, looking down at the dog. The alley was still, save for the occasional sound of a car passing by in the distance. It felt as though time had slowed to a crawl. Her gaze softened as she watched the mother dog close her eyes again, as though she were giving in to the weight of her sorrow. Maya moved closer, her knees pressing into the cold, unforgiving pavement. She didn't know how much longer the mother dog could hang on, but she knew she couldn't leave her here. She wouldn't. "Emiya, you're not alone," she whispered, her voice breaking, an emotion she rarely allowed herself to show creeping into her words. "I won't let you suffer alone." The mother dog's ears perked up slightly, but there was no further movement, no indication that the words had any effect. Maya knew that her comforting words might not change anything, might not bring back the lost puppies, but she couldn't help but offer them anyway. Something in the air shifted, a subtle change that almost made Maya believe the dog understood. Just then she heard a faint sound, footsteps approaching from behind. Her heart leaped in her chest, her pulse quickening. She stood up and turned to see a man walking briskly toward her, a tall, broad-shouldered figure who had apparently been nearby when Maya made her call to the shelter. He was young, wearing a hoodie and jeans, his face weary but kind. As he neared, his eyes immediately fell on the mother dog, and he stopped in his tracks. "I'm here to help," he said softly, though his voice was laced with the exhaustion of someone who had seen too much pain. "I'm the shelter worker you called." Relief washed over Maya as she nodded quickly, grateful for the intervention but still haunted by the reality of the situation. She stepped back, allowing the man to move closer to the mother dog. His movements were gentle, and Maya watched as he knelt down beside the dog, assessing her condition with expert care. "She's in bad shape," he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. "But we'll do what we can. Let's get her to the shelter. She's not out of options yet." Maya felt a wave of gratitude for this stranger who had arrived in the nick of time, someone who knew how to handle situations like this. Someone who could give the mother dog the chance to heal that Maya had never been able to provide on her own. But as the shelter worker gently coaxed the mother dog onto her feet, Maya's heart tightened again. The dog was still shaking, still uncertain, but for the first time in what felt like hours, there was a glimmer of hope in her eyes. She wasn't alone anymore. Maya had shown up at exactly the right time, just as this dog needed someone to step into the darkness with her. Now together, they were going to find their way out. Maya watched as the shelter worker gently coaxed the mother dog into the back of the van. The dog's movements were slow, tentative, but she didn't resist. Her eyes, still full of pain, flickered up at Maya, a silent plea that was both a question and a silent thank you. Maya's heart thudded in her chest, torn between hope and fear. They were doing the right thing. This was the beginning of the mother dog's recovery, but the road ahead would be long, and Maya wasn't sure how much of it she could face alongside the dog. The journey to the shelter was quieter than she expected. The van rumbled over potholes, its engine hum filling the space as Maya sat at the edge of her seat watching the dog. Her eyes never left the mother's frail form. The dog's breath was steady now, but still, the heaviness of the night lingered, casting an invisible shadow over them both. The shelter worker, who had introduced himself as Tom, sat quietly, glancing at Maya only occasionally. "There's a chance," Tom said softly, his voice comforting but cautious. "It's not too late. We'll help her, but she's going to need time. She's weak from the loss." Maya nodded, unable to speak. She had seen the dog's exhaustion, her fragile state. Every step seemed to cost her something. Still, something about her refusal to give up, her quiet resilience, kept Maya's hope alive. When they arrived at the shelter, Maya helped Tom carry the mother dog inside. The shelter was a bright, clean place, a haven for creatures like her, and Maya couldn't help but feel the warmth of it, despite the lingering sadness in her heart. They gently placed the mother dog on a soft bed in one of the recovery rooms, the kind reserved for animals in desperate need of care. The soft hum of fluorescent lights and the faint scent of antiseptic filled the room, but to Maya, it felt like a place of salvation. The staff wasted no time. They moved quickly, setting up an IV drip and administering fluids to the dog, who still seemed too weak to react. Maya stood back, feeling a quiet relief that the dog was in good hands. Tom gave her a reassuring smile. "She's not alone now. We'll stay with her through the night. She'll get better." But Maya wasn't so sure. The memories of the alley, the mother's vacant stare as she lay there in the dark haunted her. Would this gentle creature, so worn down by grief, ever recover fully? Could she trust again, learn to embrace life after such loss? Maya sat in the corner of the room, her mind a storm of questions. She had wanted to help this dog, but now, as the machines beeped softly in the background, she found herself wondering if she had the strength to see it through. Her own scars ran deep, too. A history of unhealed wounds from years of loss, regret, and emotional struggle was never far from her thoughts. She couldn't help but draw parallels between herself and the dog. The pain, the silence, the loneliness, it was all so familiar to her. She pulled her knees up to her chest and rested her chin on them, her thoughts spiraling. Her eyes wandered back to the mother dog, who now lay on the soft bed, her body still but breathing evenly. The peacefulness of the moment stood in stark contrast to the turmoil in Maya's chest. The silence in the room was broken only by the sound of Tom's footsteps as he checked on the other animals in the shelter. Maya didn't notice how much time had passed, but when she looked at the clock, the hours had slipped by unnoticed. It was late now, the shelter empty and quiet, except for the soft sounds of the animals in recovery. She stood up and walked over to the bed where the mother dog lay. Her eyes were closed, her face relaxed for the first time since Maya had found her. There was something peaceful about it, almost as though she were floating, free from the pain of the past few hours, even if just for a brief moment. Maya reached out and gently stroked the dog's fur. It was soft, still warm from the body heat, and she could feel the small, rhythmic movements of her chest rising and falling with each breath. Maya's fingers brushed the back of the dog's head, and for a fleeting moment, she thought she felt a slight shift in the dog's body. A subtle movement, a quiet sign that there was still some fight left in her. Maya smiled gently as if the dog could hear her thoughts. "We'll get through this," she whispered softly. "One day at a time." The night stretched on, but as Maya sat by the dog's side, she began to feel a sense of calm. The mother dog had been through so much, had suffered so greatly, but now she was in a place where she could heal. Maya realized she wasn't just talking about the dog. She was talking to herself too. For the first time in weeks, Maya allowed herself to hope, even if just for a moment. As the days passed, Maya returned to the shelter every evening, sometimes sitting for hours beside the mother dog, watching as she slowly regained strength. Her condition improved gradually. She began to eat again, though it was slow, and her eyes, once filled with emptiness, started to show signs of recognition. She no longer seemed so lost, so distant. But the healing wasn't just physical, it was emotional. Maya could see it in the way the dog responded to her presence. There was a softness in her gaze, a subtle trust that had begun to form. Maya spoke to her softly, recounting stories of her day, though she knew the dog couldn't understand the words. It didn't matter. It was the rhythm of her voice, the calm assurance that filled the room. And with every passing day, the bond between them deepened. Tom continued to monitor the mother dog's progress, though he had been clear from the beginning. This recovery would take time. Emotional wounds, especially ones born from such deep loss, didn't heal easily. But Maya, as fragile as she felt, remained by the dog's side. Each moment spent with the mother dog, every slight improvement, felt like a small victory. One evening, about a week after the mother dog's arrival at the shelter, Maya sat in the same corner of the room, reading a book. She glanced up to find the dog watching her, her eyes clear, no longer clouded by the grief that had once consumed her. For the first time, the mother dog's tail wagged, ever so slightly. Maya's heart fluttered in her chest. The simple gesture, so small and subtle, meant the world. She set the book down and walked over to the bed. The mother dog raised her head slightly, her body alert and curious. Maya knelt beside her and softly placed a hand on her head. "Good girl," Maya whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "We're getting stronger." It wasn't much, but in that moment Maya realized something. This was not just the dog's journey of healing, it was her own. She had been lost in her own grief for so long that she had forgotten what it felt like to heal, to trust, to hope. But watching the mother dog begin to trust again, begin to find peace again, gave her the strength to do the same. Together they would move forward, one small step at a time. The days grew longer as spring began to stretch its limbs, warming the world with its soft golden light. Maya stood by the window of the shelter one morning, gazing out at the park beyond. It had rained the night before, and the air was thick with the fresh scent of wet earth, the grass gleaming in the sunlight like a patchwork quilt of life, gently swaying in the wind. There was something different in the way the world felt now, lighter, as if the very air had been cleansed, renewed. The mother dog, once a shell of the vibrant creature she had been before her tragic loss, now stood at the window too, watching the world with a sense of quiet curiosity. She had gained weight, her fur was growing shinier, and her eyes no longer bore that same hollow pain. She stood a little taller, a little firmer, her posture more confident, and her tail, while still not in constant motion, gave the occasional hopeful flick. For the first time in what felt like forever, Maya could see a spark in the dog's eyes. Hope. Maya had always believed that healing, whether for people or animals, took time. Time that wasn't always linear. Time that wasn't always easy. But looking at the mother dog now, there was something undeniable in the air. The silent ache of loss, which had once consumed her, was starting to fade, piece by piece. It wasn't gone completely, and Maya knew it never would be, but the weight of it had lightened, had been replaced by something warmer, something more alive. Maya stood beside the dog and gently rested her hand on her back. "You're getting stronger, aren't you?" she whispered, her voice soft and steady, her words more to herself than the dog. The bond between them had deepened in ways Maya hadn't expected. She had spent so much of her life running from connections, avoiding attachments because of her own fears and insecurities. But this dog, this beautiful, resilient creature, had changed that. The quiet way the dog had let Maya in, the way their pain intertwined, had slowly taught her that healing wasn't about forgetting the past. It was about learning to live with it, to move forward in spite of it. Maya smiled as she ran her fingers through the dog's fur. "It's okay, she said. "You don't have to forget them to keep going." The mother dog had come so far. The frailty that had once defined her was now replaced with a quiet strength, one that Maya could feel in the way the dog held herself. Her fur, once matted and ragged, was soft and thick again, her eyes no longer clouded by grief. There was a calm in the dog's presence, a new gentleness that Maya couldn't help but be moved by. She had witnessed the mother's journey from the depths of loss and pain, and now she was watching her reclaim herself, step by step, moment by moment. The air was cool, the world outside the shelter still and serene, as if it too was holding its breath. The day had just begun, but Maya could feel the weight of time pressing on her. She had spent so many hours with this dog, each moment shared between them felt like it had been carved from eternity. It was hard to believe how far they had come. From the cold alley, from the stillness of the night to this, a quiet morning of healing, a peaceful moment that was as fragile as it was powerful. Maya shifted slightly, gently running her hand through the dog's fur. The dog stirred, lifting her head slightly, her eyes locking with Maya's. There was no fear in her gaze now, no hesitation, just a deep, trusting silence. In that look, Maya felt an unspoken understanding, a connection that went beyond words, beyond actions. It was in the simple presence they shared. "You've made it," Maya whispered, her voice thick with emotion, her hand resting softly on the dog's head. "You've come so far, and you've taught me so much. I don't think I'll ever be able to thank you for that." The dog's ears twitched at the sound of Maya's voice, but there was no response. And yet in the stillness of the moment, Maya knew the dog heard her, felt her presence, and understood her words. There was no need for anything more. The first few steps had been tentative. In the beginning, the dog had been too weak to move much, her body refusing to respond to the simple acts of walking, eating, or even sleeping. But with each passing day, the dog had become more confident. She began to walk with Maya around the shelter grounds, exploring the small garden and the peaceful surroundings, sniffing at the flowers, sitting in the sunlight, and even wagging her tail occasionally. as if rediscovering the world that she had once known. Every small victory, every step forward felt like a gift. But the road to recovery had not been easy. There had been moments when Maya doubted, when the dog seemed so distant, so lost in her grief, that Maya feared it might be too late. Yet every time, the dog surprised her. She would lift her head, push through the pain, and take one more step. It was in those moments that Maya understood the true meaning of resilience. The mother dog had taught her that healing didn't happen all at once. It wasn't an instant process or a quick fix. Healing came slowly, quietly, and often when you least expected it. Maya was interrupted from her thoughts when the mother dog slowly lifted her body from Maya's lap. She stood, her legs shaky but strong, and stretched her back before taking a few cautious steps toward the door. Maya watched, a soft smile tugging at her lips as she followed the dog's movements. For a moment, she simply stood there, watching the dog as she took a tentative step into the hallway of the shelter, her tail held high. The dog paused at the doorway, looking back at Maya as if to ask, "Are you coming?" Maya's heart swelled in her chest. She had witnessed the journey, the transformation, and now it seemed the dog was ready to take the next step, toward something greater than just survival. Maya stepped forward, and for the first time in a long while felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel before: freedom. Not just for the dog, but for herself. She had spent so much time keeping herself locked away, too afraid to trust, too afraid to let herself heal. But watching this dog, a creature who had known such sorrow, reclaim her life, Maya felt the walls she had built around herself begin to crumble. Together, they walked out of the shelter and into the yard. The sun was higher now, casting soft, warm rays over the green grass, the flowers that had bloomed in the wake of spring. The mother dog trotted ahead, her steps more confident now, the weight of her past no longer holding her back. Maya watched her with a sense of awe, her heart swelling with pride. The dog paused again, looking back at Maya. There was no hesitation now, no fear. The dog was free to live, to trust, to move forward. And in that moment, Maya realized that she too had been given the freedom to move forward. The bond they shared was not just one of caretaker and rescued animal. It was one of two beings who had found a way to survive the darkest of times and come out stronger on the other side. The dog turned her head back to face the open field ahead, her tail wagging in the breeze. Maya followed, stepping into the light with her, each step a quiet victory, each breath a moment of release. Maya didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time she felt ready for whatever came next.